Such an enthusiastic
Of
morning.
course, you can give me coffee. You can make me do labor for how many people?
All right.
We
haven't seen you, Cheta. We missed you.
I demand an increase in pay.
Okay.
Okay.
You will get
It'll
that.
be
You're not the only one
considered.
clamoring for that.
No, the union is going on strike now. And we're doing the most effective strike. We're striking right now.
Right now. Okay, so if you do not want Cheta to go on the strike, please follow him on Twitter at Cheta and tell him that we don't want him to stay. In the meanwhile, please
Good,
follow
don't
us.
want me
to
to stay.
leave.
Okay.
We don't want him to
No, no,
leave.
I said we want him to stay. That's what I said. You didn't
No,
hear
you
me
said we
clearly.
don't.
No,
Two of us did not hear you clearly. Seriously.
Okay, so please follow us at Smooth981 FM on Twitter and use the hashtag FreshlyPress981 to send in your comments for our stories today.
We're also streaming live on YouTube. You want to take advantage of that. If you haven't subscribed, subscribing is one way to get the first prompt as soon as we go live, so you can watch us in the studio. Have we given the WhatsApp number?
Nope.
089 440 981. That is the number for your messages. 0809 444 0981. Cheta, let's start with a story from the Punch newspaper. The World Bank is warning the federal government of impending inflation. He said that the World Bank is saying that Nigeria should reform now to stop further slide into extreme poverty. We already know from statistics that over 100 million Nigerians are living, surviving on barely $1.90 a day. But what are your thoughts regarding the story as they're pegging it against the oil benchmark and every other metric?
There are a number of factors that the World Bank is looking at. But before we even start talking about it, the first thing that I will wonder about is whether the government will take it seriously. And the reason I ask that question is you want to consider the fact that the president has shown it is disdain, if you like, for data that is not flattering of his government, and he did say something along the lines of that their data is faulty and all of that. I read the report itself, or well, I have not read the full reports, but I've started reading it, and it's dire, for want of a better word. And here's where the problem is. Nigeria's population is growing very fast. We push out a new baby every 4 seconds. One person dies in Nigeria every 14 seconds. So which means that our population is way more than replacement levels. By the time one person dies, like 3 people are born. So our population rate is the 25th highest in the world. But here's the key thing. Among the top 10 most populated countries, we are the only one whose population growth rate is in the top 50 in the world. Pakistan, which is one of the top 10 most populated countries, has a population growth rate that is number 52 in the world. We are number 25. That means that we're on track to become the third most populated country in the world within the next 3 decades.
Wow.
That's one. The economic growth rate, we all saw the GDP figures last 2 weeks ago. Economic growth rate is anemic at best. We've not since 2014, since 2015 actually, our economic growth rate has been below population growth rates. So in practical terms, I'll use the expression that an Indian economist used when he was talking about India just before the elections there. He said India feels like it's in a recession because the economic growth rate is not up to 2 times the population growth rate there. So they feel like they're in a recession because economic growth rate is not up to twice population growth rates. Our economic growth rate is actually less than population growth rates. So imagine how it will feel like here. In terms of raw numbers, our GDP per capita, which is your total GDP divided by your population, peaked at $3,222 thereabouts in 2014. And since then, it hasn't quite fallen as it has dropped. There's a difference between a gradual decline, which is something that it's easier to turn around, and then a drop. If you look at a graph of Nigeria's GDP per capita, you will find that it was having gradual growth, then during the time of the oil boom, it shot up. And then shortly after that, it dropped. Then about 1999, it began to grow again. And then the growth accelerated from 2004 to reach that 2014 high of $3,222 per person. Now it is $1,969 per person essentially in just 5 years. It's dropped tremendously. Unfortunately, our policies are not the most helpful. We have policies that have the net effect of actually harming the people that they claim to be helping. So, for example, if you look deep into the GDP numbers that were released 2 weeks ago, you'll find that trade, which is the second highest employer of labor in Nigeria, is in recession and has been growing very slowly for a very long time. So policies such as border closure and all of that, which directly impact trade, are not helpful. But hey, so essentially what the World Bank is saying is, guys, you guys have to rethink your policies. It's not by platitudes or anything. You actually have serious work to do. And we do have serious work to do.
All right, let's hope by 2020 or 2021 we can see some trends that might make us feel a bit optimistic about the economy. Looking to the next story, in Telegraph, the Independent National Electoral Commission has started verification of the presence of the 92 registered political parties in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. It was feared that the exercise might be the process of deregistering some of the parties that have failed to meet the requirements. But what do you make of their findings?
They've just started, so they don't have any findings yet. Although deregistering some of the parties is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, frankly, we have some parties that's if one wants to denigrate them, you call them mushroom parties. But for the sake of being polite, I'll call them portfolio parties. I think that INEC's action is just whitewashing. The first problem is some of the requirements for parties. I mean, we've been at this democracy thing, if it can still be called a democracy. We've been at it for 20 years now. Yeah. And by now, there are some things that should be blindly obvious. So some of the requirements for having a political party are really too steep. You have this requirement that they should have a presence in every local government area in the country, or that's frankly ridiculous. There are some parties that will always be fringe parties, regardless, and the only way that they can come into the discussion is if, so for example, take in the UK, you have the DUP, which is located just in Northern Ireland. You have the SNP, I mean, the name says it all, Scottish National Party. Those kind of things are realities, and we must bring our politics in line with realities. Another thing that INEC really needs to talk about is the incentive for violence. When you provide that incentive, then basically people will just set up briefcase parties just to get to do endorsements and collect money. Those are practical issues that INEC needs to worry about, not probing, announce a probe, get the white paper, the thing will start to gather dust somewhere. I beg.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, it's fine. I understand your sentiment in terms of saying it's not necessary. Because here's my question, right?
We have 20 years of facts now.
If as a political party you expect to garner votes, I understand the analogy you gave with the Scottish party and all that. But shouldn't you have enough capacity to show that you're a serious party, at least to have representation in every local government area? If you can't,
there are 774 local.
Why still exist as a party?
There are 774 local government areas in a country that has 528 languages. You cannot. What is a political party? A political party is a gathering of people with ideas. Now, with similar ideas. In a country as diverse as this, you cannot have people with similar ideas in all 774 local governments. It's impractical. What happens next? The next step of political formation after that is coalition building. So what we should be talking about is, instead of all this, every party will throw up one candidate and then leave all of us with our heads spinning. Let us talk of building coalitions. But then we need to have parties. So there is no crime if you have a party that is set up solely to represent the interest of Igbo Traders Union. There is not a crime.
There's not a crime there.
Yeah. So if you have such a party, that party can say, okay, at this point in time, our interests align with the interests of NURTW. Let us have a coalition with them for this election. After the election, when we achieve our aims and all of that, everybody shakes hands and go their separate ways. But forcing them together, it creates what we have, like for example, PDP towards the end or APC now. You have special purpose vehicles that just basically spend a lot of time in internal wrangling. Because let us be honest with ourselves. Right now, we don't have governance happening. What we have is politicking. And it's because the APC is an unwieldy machine that exists just for the sake of having power. So what they're doing is they're fighting themselves, positioning for 2023. 2019 is not yet over.
All right, thank you so much, Cheta. Let's go to some comments. Rainmaker here says, Cheta, please calm down, drink water. Buhari plans to take 10 million Nigerians out of poverty every year for the next 10 years. No third-term agenda, please. He doesn't just have a plan yet, and no one is asking him. Can you borrow us $29.6 billion? Iko Buhari and co will not be around in the next 2 to 3 decades that these Bretton Woods agencies are warning about. It's just me and you and our kids.
Dr. I says, hello. Cheta, why do you bother? Is it hate speech saying the obvious, or stating the obvious, or stating facts that are negative to the government? It is.
It's called false declaration of facts.
Is that the sad thing is that most hailers have contingency plans to escape Nigeria, leaving the poor masses in extreme poverty. Wow, the sentiments, the pessimism out there is interesting. Now, the National Universities Commission, they said they have uncovered about 100 fake professors across Nigerian universities. This announcement was made by the Executive Secretary, Professor Abubakar Rashid. He stated this at the Commission's bulletin, November edition of their bulletin, stating that they went through a process where they required the lecturers to provide their CVs, and upon verification, they realized they discovered the 100 fake professors uploaded on their portal. In the past weeks, we've been talking about the IPPIS and the system and how ASU was kicking against it. And now this. Your thoughts, please.
I think it's just grandstanding by the NUC. I mean, I grew up in on a university campus, so I have a fair idea of the process it takes to become an associate professor, to move from senior lecturer 2 to senior lecturer, to lecturer 2 to lecturer 1 to senior lecturer to associate professor to professor. What is a fake professor? Is it that these guys don't have peer-reviewed papers, or is it that they just go about they're carrying the title? I mean, after all, we have people who call them. We have in short, at Allen Avenue, we have something called University of Suya, and you should go and close it down. I mean, this is us just focusing on this thing. After all, the governor of Cross River State, Ben Ayade, he calls himself professor. He doesn't have the required number of peer-reviewed papers, so he's not a professor. But go and let's Professor Abubakar Rashid go and tell Ayade that he's not a professor. They will chain him and put him in court there for treason. See, the real issue that the NUC should be focusing on is getting a research output up. When you look at the numbers, for example, from the Schemago database, the numbers are quite embarrassing. Last year, Nigeria had less than 10,000 peer-reviewed papers uploaded to that database. Comparison: the US had 1.2 million peer-reviewed papers. China had 590,000. South Africa had 273,000. Egypt had 204,000. We had less than 10,000. That's where we should be focusing on, getting our academics to be more productive. But of course, our academics will be more productive when they're busy fighting peace fights, which I don't support them for, or they're busy fighting unionizing things and all of that. It's a problem with Nigeria across board. Productivity. We need to improve on that. This is just grandstanding.
Why is it just grandstanding? If they identify fake professors, they reduce the staff.
They should identify fake cleaners too. Since we have fake for every, is it not in this same country that we have fake NYSC camp, fake this, fake hire, fake
level students getting into NYSC, but they are being discovered, so that's a good thing, right?
Focus on improving productivity, and this will not be an issue. This is the academics. Academics is one of those systems that is actually a self. What's the word? Because they do this peer review thing a lot. If you are not, you won't need to be coming to make announcements. if everything is, then everybody will know this is the genuine academic, this is not the academic,
All right.
because you will have the papers there for people to
And
know.
the systems to be strong enough to identify them.
All right, thank you so much. So prioritizing their focus areas.
Yeah.
Now, Comrade Henry says, I doubt if the federal government will take the advice of the World Bank since it has supported restructuring, which is against the policy of the former. Let the bank say now that the economy is improving by a certain percentage based on certain data at its disposal. The federal government would have quickly applauded the financial organization for its accurate data. And then we have Gideon Lokon, who says that sometimes the new age ASU is not the ASU of old. Coming from a child who grew up in universities, the ones there now think it is student union. The main problem of Nigeria is the ability to fake anything and to justify the fake over the real, as well as productivity that you mentioned.
Thank you, Jide from Lagos. Our next story is from Premium Times. Buhari's aide minister disagree over exit plans for empowered beneficiaries. The special advisor to the president, Muhammadu Buhari, on social investments, Ayo Mairo Ese, has denied the claim by the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadiya Farouk, that the National Social Investment Office, NSIO, had no exit plan for empowered beneficiaries. So Mrs. Uwais had said that the administrators had made exit plans which have not been implemented as discussions were still ongoing on many fronts. She also said she had briefed Mrs. Farouk on these plans while she was reacting to statements by the created ministry, Mrs. Farouk. They both had a tiff going back and forth. But
Essentially, Miriam Ware said that Sadiya Farouk lied talk. That is what she had said, because she said point blank that she briefed Sadiya Farouk. Now, if she briefed Sadiya Farouk and Sadiya Farouk is saying, oh, there is no exit plan, it's either Sadiya is a liar or Miriam Ware is incompetent. It's one of the two. What worries me, and we see it in so many instances in this particular government, is this lack of communication. One person will come and say one thing, and then another person in the same government who should have been in the same room when it was discussed will come out and say something completely different.
What was the reason, though?
It's clear that they're working at cross purposes. When we're talking about the political party thing, it's a manifestation of the same thing. Different people with different mindsets, with different areas of focus, with different outlooks to life. You bring them together and then you expect them to. It doesn't work. Now, what worries me about this whole Empower one is it is clear that the whole thing has died, and it's also clear. It's just unfortunately we don't retrace our steps in this country. We just keep plugging ahead. But it's also clear that the model that was applied in UWIN, better model, private sector driven, as it were, versus all this public thing. I mean, UWIN was a model where grants were given to entrepreneurs to set up businesses so they can employ people. We knew beneficiaries of UWIN. We saw how one beneficiary that I keep pointing to is Hannah Kabe in Kano. She set up a something to do with power. She still employs people. It is still going till today. But our own was government largesse, call people, give them 30K. Now there are complaints all over the place that even this 30K they're being owed. It is clear, or it should be clear, let me rephrase that. It should be clear to anybody who has eyes in his head that the private sector driven model is far more efficient in allocating resources than this model of just largesse. But we will not retrace ourselves, and that is the problem.
All right, thank you so much. So in terms of reevaluation, impact assessment, as you would do when a project is set up at on international levels, we don't actually do that. Perhaps this is a call for that. But let's move on to our next story, Cheta. 18 billion naira University of Transportation inaugurated in Daura. Now here's some details of this story. The president inaugurated the construction of the 18 billion naira University of Transportation yesterday, and it's to be completed in the next 1.5 years. Now, while performing the groundbreaking ceremony, he said the newly established institution would bring rapid development to the transportation sector, as well as generate both academic and non-academic employment opportunities for Nigerians. Now, this addresses a number of things we've already spoken about. We're looking at employment opportunities. We're looking at, making the transportation sector more effective, perhaps more efficient, and also just in terms of promoting creativity, promoting promoting innovation in Nigeria. What do you think about this?
Can we jump on pause?
No, we can't.
You see, you're talking, you are reading from the government spreadsheet that is talking all positive, and so let us all just sing kumbaya together and move. Because if I talk
Oh
what I
no,
want to
please
talk now,
analyze it, because we have
they will say
this.
that I'm being negative.
I mean, it's a story that.
How many universities do we have in Nigeria? Last time I checked, we have about 190. How many of them are effective? How many of them are mushroom universities? The last federal government, the Jonathan government, established 9. This time around, we've seen the chief of army staff establish one in his hometown. We've seen the chief of air staff establish one in his hometown. Now we are seeing transportation university being established in the president. So, what is a transportation university, by the way? Instead of us to focus on improving the already existing ones and then actually shutting down some of the ones that are glorified secondary schools, again, it boils into all of these things. We have this history of opening things. It's clearly not working, but somehow we'll just keep it working. There are things that were established in 1979 that have not produced one screwdriver.
All right, let me just answer your question as to what the University of Transportation.
I have a problem with the location of this.
No, hold on. Before you talk about the location, let me answer your question. So it's the first in Africa, the University of Transportation.
We love all these first in Africa.
Wait, hold on. It will pave the way for the domestication of railway engineering and bridge the technology and skill gap in the railway and transportation sector. Just thought to inform you now.
We don't even produce steel. So how are you going to produce the rail lines? Let us start with that. Now.
All right, go on with the location.
Now, it would have made more sense if this were located in Jibia, which is a bit off the way from Daura. Why Jibia? Jibia is a major transport hub. You understand? It's kind of like if you want to locate a transport university, again, whatever that is, somewhere in the southwest, the place that makes the most sense is Ore, because that's the transportation. I mean, come on. So, Jibia is not on any major trade routes. Nothing happens there. Daura. I have been there. The only time Daura bubbles is when everybody comes to, Buhari goes to his hometown, everybody comes to pay homage. When he leaves, Daura will fade away. That is, and then this thing will just be there, pushing it. Prediction: this will become another Ajaokuta. It will just be there guzzling money. Nothing will come out of it.
Well, let's hope not, Cheta.
You don't build a country on hope. You build a country on plans based on data. We have a history of not doing that. Instead, we build on hope. Where has hope gotten us? World Bank tells us we already have the highest number of people suffering multidimensional poverty in the world, and in 30 years we'll have 25% of all such people. It's there in the world. 25% of all such people in humanity.
All right. Okay, thank you very much indeed. But just to also remember that a factory was also set up in Kajala in Ogun State, and the Minister of Transportation, Chibuke Amechi, was also criticized for situating this particular university in Daura, but he said that's what he chose to do, and anyone can. In
short, the Premium Times report is even more enlightening. He said he said Premium Times made it very clear that he did that to make Buhari happy. I mean, is that how you cite a university, just to make one man happy?
All right, thank you very much. Well, we have a comment here from Ada in Ikoyi, says University of Transportation in Daura. Daura, what is that? Now, wow, I guess the lecturers will be Chinese and from Julius Berger. I retire, or a mature recession is loading, since we will not wake up and learn from our several mistakes. This government has no vision, and hope is not a plan.
Ayo Mairo Ese says, I really feel, Cheta, most of what you see in the government are negative. Why do we need another university in the president's hometown? Have you seen South African secondary schools? Not university or secondary schools. We have mushroom universities and poultry secondary schools that help Nigeria, he said. Shayi from Lagos says, I beg, what is transportation university? So now, should a department, so what should be a department in a faculty should now be a university?
Not exactly, Shayi. Not exactly. You can have universities just like technical colleges for a particular purpose.
Yeah, we have Army University. Technical college. Why not call it technical college? Maybe we'll call it. So let us be honest.
V says, I do not get this country at all, and they say we're broke. Questions in there.
All right, thank you so much. Let's move on. Talking about partnerships with China, as the University of Transportation is one. We move on to this new news story from Daily Times. China, Nigeria signed MOU, Memorandum of Understanding for construction of 5,200 housing units. So you're not happy with the University of Transportation in Daura. Are you happy with the 5,200 housing units in this partnership, Cheta? Cheta Nwaeze. All right, so I'll tell you the details of the story since Cheta is thinking about that. The hereby province investors of People's
A
Republic of
memorandum of
China. Wait,
understanding.
hold on.
A memorandum of
Cheta, hold
understanding
on.
is just an expression of.
Cheta, let me finish the story first of all. So on Monday they signed an MOU with a Nigerian firm and for the construction of 5,200 housing units in the FCT. Please proceed.
Have you on my mic?
It's on.
Okay. A memorandum of understanding is an agreement between two parties that expresses a convergence of interests. That is the textbook definition of memorandum of understanding. We have so many MOUs that we have signed that nothing has happened. But they will sign MOU and they will come to the press and blazing us with, we've signed an MOU, we've signed an MOU, we've signed. Then nothing will happen further down the line. I can give examples. Naira Yuan swap, for example. Anyway, now, these 5,200 housing units that they want to build in Abuja, they will build it. Abuja, second to Ikoyi and Banana Island, not the full Lagos, so Ikoyi and Banana Island, has the highest rate of unoccupied buildings in Nigeria. So they will build it. Who can pay to enter there?
Very good point.
The most of the construction that is happening in this country right now is just Abuja, and it speaks to the fact that our political class are just concerned. This is not an APC problem. It started even during the PDP. We were constructing just in Abuja. The rest of the country, all the cranes, or almost all the cranes, were in Abuja, and then of course in high-end Lagos. The rest of the country left as a fallow wasteland. I mean, harbor. Then later you turn around and be surprised that everybody is migrating to Lagos and Abuja. That is it.
Thank you very much. I like the fact that you also point to the cost of the housing. Should we be more focused on affordable housing for Nigerians? I mean, look at the income, the purchasing power of the average Nigerian and build houses that people can actually live in.
That's one. Number two, we should also be focused on unlocking Nigeria's private sector by, for example, repealing the Land Use Act, so that because what happens in Nigeria typically is because of the Land Use Act, a lot of the capital that could have been invested in housing and all of that is debt capital, so people don't invest. All
right. Thank you very much indeed. Now, some people are still commenting on the investor transportation story. Seems to be quite popular this morning.
This one here says, it's from Prince. Prince Larry says, well, university in Daura from Amici is what happens when people are put in government office without competence. It's alleging that it's a bribe to remain relevant. Very interesting. FA here says, Chesa is on a roll. Wale says, University of Transport. To do what? It should go and establish the University of Poverty. She says poverty in the land. And Maurice says, I had to relocate to Lagos, where my parents stay, to continue my training as well. Shemu says, well, I told someone that nothing comes out of the Naira. You on swap nonsense on Twitter. That's a reaction that you're giving. Shemu, thank you very much for your message. And Femi says, can you imagine Amici establishing transportation university at Daura for what? Is this not how they will spend away the $30 billion in the name of infrastructure?
All right, thank you, Olufemi and all who've sent in comments. Our final story for this morning from the Guardian newspaper. Senate admits seeking jobs from ministries, departments, agencies for legislators, cronies. So just in terms of seeking for their constituent members for legislators. Well, let's hear what you think about this, Cheta.
I don't know why that surprises anybody. It all goes to the whole World Bank report thing. To be honest, I feel for many of our political office holders and appointees, because the truth of the matter, and this goes into the nature of corruption in Nigeria. The truth of the matter is that many of them, the moment they enter office, they are assailed by requests and demands from their country people, and it takes someone of almost superhuman, almost with a superhuman ability to look the other way, to ignore this. So what happens is that many of these people turn government offices, government parastatals into largesse in terms of job distribution, and they will say that they've created jobs. So what it does is it ends up raising the overhead, because again, we'll come back to that thing that in Nigeria, once we have a bad policy, we don't rescind it. So it comes down to making our civil service and all of that over-bloated, with an over-bloated number of staff, over-bloated wage bill, people who are doing nothing. I'll give an example. I don't know, okay, you guys weren't here. Femi, who used to work in IT here, he left here and for a job in Enugu. And one time I was in Enugu, I visited him. He was a head of IT at ESBS, Enugu State Broadcasting Service. And this was under the governorship of Sullivan Chime. Sullivan wanted ESBS to become professionally run. And he gave Jika Atto, the director general that they had been appointed, latitude to do a lot.
Yeah.
So Femi was the person that Jika appointed to be head of IT. There were 156 people in the engineering department of ESBS at the time. ESBS could only do 8 hours radio, 4 hours TV a day with 156 engineers. By the time Femi arrived and did serious interviews for these guys, he found that only 8 were competent. So they had to let out the 148 go.
Yeah.
They couldn't let them go because civil servants, so they transferred them out. Do you know, with those 8, ESBS started running 24/24 service. As in, so you had 148 people who didn't know the job. But typically, when you have that number of people who are faffing around, not doing anything, the people who can work will not work because of lack of motivation.
Exactly.
End of story in terms of all of this.
A
This is
little
where
living's a whole bread. Thank you so much,
Nice.
Cheta. Unfortunately, we cannot take any more comments or stories, but thank you so much, Cheta, at Checkster. Please kindly go to his Twitter page and say a big thank you to him on our behalf. And of course, follow us at Smooth91 FM. If you have more comments, use the hashtag FreshlyPress981 so we can continue the conversation. In a few minutes, we'll have Grapevine 981 and we have Miss Eva Johnson joining us on the show. Good morning.
Good morning.